We had an earlier closed session meeting that we need to close out before we get started on our regularly scheduled workshop this evening. So I'll make a motion to come out of closed session. Engstrom motion and Braun supported. Those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. Second call to the public. This is only for our special meeting. We do have a call to the public coming up. Anyone right now? Great, thank you. Board member comments, anyone? Thank you. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Thank you. And it's 6:58. We'll wait about 2 minutes to get started on our regular meeting. Thanks. There we are. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'd like to call the workshop to order. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't see where it says workshop here.
It doesn't say workshop, but our last meeting was an actual meeting, so, and we always like to let everyone know that this is our workshops, that we do like to just have our discussions and talk about as many things as we can, so our meetings are more understandable for everyone watching. So that takes us on to our roll call. Angie, would you like to do the roll call this evening?
Thomas.
Here.
Otto.
Here.
Westovers here. Engstrom.
Here.
Dockett.
Here?
Braun. Chick.
Here. All right. Going on to adopt the balance of the agenda. Are there any deletions, additions, anything from anyone?
I would like to delete number 3 completely from the agenda. And that's the sewer bill settlement.
Yeah. Paul, do you need a vote on that, or?
Yes.
He wants to remove something from the agenda items.
The board can remove it if you want to, or table it.
Right, but does that require a vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me?
Can we ask why?
Yeah, I'd like to take, can you hear me? I'd like to take a little more time on this to try to figure out, investigate a little bit and study up, see why this is happening, and how we might be able to get through this so it's not happening every little while now. So it just seems to me that I didn't find out about it until Thursday of this week, and I don't see any hurry on it. That's my opinion. So that's why I'd like to have a little more information about it.
Paul, can you give me some direction? We've never had someone want to take something off with, a lot of people, I think, not wondering, not maybe in favor. Do we need just everyone be in favor of taking it off, or a majority vote, or?
It's a majority vote, or when you get to that item, somebody can move the table.
Okay.
I guess I would, to Mr. Dockett's point, I don't mind a table after discussion, but I would ask that the board entertain the discussion prior to deciding on a tabling. I think there are some issues for not acting.
All right, I agree. I think it should be still discussed, and so I would like to still keep it on it as an agenda item.
So
Fine.
that's going to be on under discussion?
No, they're saying it'll stay on as an
Agenda item. We
We'll
can-
discuss it and then at that point decide whether or not it should be tabled or voted on.
We have been voting on our workshops, and our agenda items those are the ones that we are voting on.
We only put voting items on the workshop that need to be voted on in that particular time period. So we try to limit it to discussion, but just in terms of normal business, it's not always possible.
Well, we've been messing around with this since 2001. I don't see the hurry.
Okay. I would highly encourage the board to hear the conversation and the debate prior to a vote on postponement. I'm certainly have no issues if the board decides to vote on postponement, but I would like you to hear the debate.
I feel we can learn through discussion, so I'd like to hear it. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. So, once again, any additions or deletions to the agenda? I'll make a motion to adopt the balance of the agenda.
Support.
Engstrom motioned, Thomas supported. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. On to our first call to the public. It's an opportunity for anyone to get up and share your thoughts. Please keep in mind it is not a question and answer session, and we do limit you to 3 minutes. Our first speaker, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Dale Brewer. I live at 11548 East Shore Drive, and I am in the sewer district, and I do have some comments regarding the sewer billing settlement. It's my understanding that this property is going to be subject to a closing and a change in ownership at the end of the month. I don't know where it stands as far as the township notifying the title company regarding the amount that's owed or how that goes, but they should have been at least notified or called by the title company regarding that prior to this. I think if you look at the 7818, which is the amount that's listed as the current amount owed plus the 453, and you look at it from the perspective that this is already less than 50% of the amount that should have been charged during this time, because the amount has been changed from 2 units, 2 RU units to 5.4 RU units. So you already have cut this bill in half or greater than in half if you look at the total amount of $82.72. The sewer district is looking at what they need to do as far as for expansions, et cetera. It's unfair to the people that have been paying the full amount to continue to give this concession of half to the people that haven't contributed. Your sewer ordinance requires that these people pay, whether they're billed or not billed. It's a non-issue. They know that they're hooked up. And this is the time to stand up and say, let's charge this accordingly. And if this guy wants to close on his property, pay up the $8,272, get the check at closing. It's a done deal. Stand up and do what's right here. I mean, the other thing is that, he's still getting a tremendous deal. He's not charged any late fees. On each one of these bills, there's a late fee or delinquent fee. The fee is just the net amount. So again, keep that in mind. You're still not collecting what is truly owed, even at the 8272. So please, 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 if you're going to make a decision on that tonight, look at the whole amount, not a half, not a 50%. This guy's in a corner too. He wants to close on the property. And if you don't do it, then I would suggest, as Wayne has suggested, that you table this until the next meeting if you need more information on it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other speakers this evening? No? All right, that takes us on to correspondence and announcements. Does anyone have anything? Howard?
Yeah, just some quick announcements. Some things that we're working on. We've got just updates for everyone. We've got new computers being ordered in the office. Ended up deciding on ordering 4 new computers in the office. So everyone, with the exception of one person in the office who has a relatively fast computer already, or one of the newer computers, will be getting brand new computers. We've updated the router. One of the things that we do every year is take a look at our utility contracts. Previously, probably about 6 months, a year ago, the board authorized me to sign administrative contracts as long as they were indicated in the budget, so they will not be coming in front of the board. I will be making the best decision financially for the township. Maybe some might not agree, others will, but ultimately I will go with what I believe is in the best financial interest of the township. We are looking at right now the electricity contract and the gas contract. The electricity contract that we currently have is so low, I don't think we'll ever get to the contract rate that we had signed 3 years ago. In retrospect, we probably should have signed a 4-year deal. It was that low. So we are looking at that. We are also looking at the gas contracts. This is something that I do every year so that we don't just revert back to DTE or the electricity company. We use the choice program to get us the best rates. And so this is something that is a cost savings for the township. I'll be updating you guys as to the savings and how those contracts play out in my manager's reports. In addition, we are also switching over all of our phones to Spectrum, which was Charter. We believe that we're going to realize a significant savings in the neighborhood of potentially up to about $10,000 for a year. So a large savings there, and we're in the process of already making that transition and switch. Those are some things that we're working on internally that sort of cost savings to the township, and it's not the most interesting stuff that we get to talk about, but it's ultimately good things to think about. So if anybody has any questions, I'm welcome to talk about any of the details.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Talking about natural gas, do you know how much natural gas is today?
Right now, we're paying $4 something, and current contracts are floating around $3.29 to $3.49, depending on the length. We'll probably maybe making a natural gas decision in a few weeks.
It's $2.10 today. That's what natural gas is.
That's not what we're paying.
I know.
Right.
But I'm just saying that's what natural gas is today. It's on the market today at $2.10. I just wanted to, because I know that you were.
That doesn't include distribution, Mr. Dockett.
No, I'm just saying that's what the market is today.
That's fine.
I'm not saying, I just want.
We're just not comparing apples and apples.
Well, I just want to know what we're going to be paying, that's all.
Yep, it'll be included in my manager's report.
Okay. And you don't have a manager's report. I just wanted to ask one question about what happened on the drain. I know this is not part of this, but the drain district out there that we had to pay for on Earhart Road or wherever it was.
Yeah, they began construction on the drain district out there, and that's gonna start showing up in people's assessments I don't have an exact date of when that's going to start showing up in people's assessments, but we will start having to budget that $10,000.
So it'll be in our budget also?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Wayne?
No, excuse me?
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Anyone else? All right, let's get on to our agenda items. Number one, the letter of engagement.
So in front of you today, we have been talking about the Whitmore Lake SAD project, and I think we have some stuff to discuss on that in open session. We can certainly do it under the sewer capacity. But one of the items that in order to implement a SAD project, you have to have a number of things. But the two things that are required is bond counsel and financial advisor, or FA. We do have bond counsel retained, who is Steve Mann, and as financial advisors, we use Benzinski and Associates, and they are here tonight. I am recommending to use Benzinski. The township has used Benzinski for many years in the past projects. The Benzinski and Associates has actually been with us on this project for a number of years. Previously, before some of the federal regulations changed, that you could sort of have that understanding that they would be that they could do work for us without an official engagement. But with some of the recent federal regulations, the township must engage them under contract. And so in front of you, you have the contract for Benzinski and Company. If we decide that the project does not go forward, then we would be billed hourly based on the time that they have already put into it and at the time that we use, on a not to exceed item of $7,500. If we do move forward with the project, I believe it is a not to exceed $11,500, or a flat fee of $11,500. Those are reasonable, in my experience, reasonable FA amounts. We have been using Benzinski for this project for a number of years, and I do recommend that the board authorize Benzinski and Associates for this engagement.
Wayne, go ahead.
Okay, so this, we're on page 2, top of the page, 11,500 is for the project. Second from the last, third from the last paragraph, the 7,500. So it's a either or, it's not both. You don't,
No, it's not both.
We're not adding them together.
That's correct.
Okay, and they also have the out-of-pocket stuff, postage, telephone, mileage, airfare, meals, lodging. So that's kind of chicken feed when you look at the other stuff. Or so, are we going to use this regardless of what way we go?
Which one? What's that, Mr. Dockett?
Huh?
I didn't hear the question.
Are we going to be using this? Are they going to be billing us for postage and telephone, and mileage and airfare and meals?
Postage
If we
and,
go either way, it doesn't.
yes, postage and mile is under the 11,500. Does that include all expenses, or expenses, postage, mileage, extra?
In addition.
In addition.
In
Okay.
addition to, but that fee would be minimal, and that would all.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Excuse me. They would be in addition to, and those fees would all be subject to, serving at the request of the township or the township manager. But again, those fees would be minimal. And,
Okay, can you talk a little closer to the mic?
sorry.
Yeah.
Those would be at the request of the township or the township manager, and those fees would be minimal, and they would only be, in relation to information that's sent specifically to you guys per your request.
Thank you. I have nothing else.
Anyone else? All right, I'll make a motion to approve the engagement contract as presented in a township package.
Support.
Ingstrom motioned, Otto supported. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for coming in this evening. Okay, next agenda item, number 2, is the consent judgment.
So I'm going to do the best to get started here, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Burns and Mr. Hamilton, who's counsel for the folks that are here today asking for signature and approval of the consent judgment. visual sort of representation of what we're looking at. This is Wiedeman's Point, which is related to this project. Wiedeman's Point, for all of you who know, is, or if you all know where I live, it's very close to where I live. The properties that we're looking at today is related to just to the south of where I live. There are 6 lots. Okay, so lot 18, 19, 20, 24, 25, and 26. So if you can see here. They are lakefront.
There's one house,
3 lakefront, 3 homes. Okay?
and there's one house on it, Howard?
There's 1 house.
Yeah.
So 3 lakefront, 3 homes. Okay? 3 lakefront, the road crew. So what this is, it's a platted subdivision. And Mr. Trepanier and his colleagues or company incorporated.
Howard, I can't hear you.
Mr. Trepanier, who's in the audience, and his colleagues or company has purchased those 6 lots. On those 6 lots, he has purchased all 6. It's all one parcel, okay? And he came into the township requesting a building permit. Indicated that he was going to tear down the existing house that was there at a certain time, not initially, and he was going to build 2 new single-family homes on the lake. Now, in any normal situation and circumstance, nothing would be, this would be a non-issue. He has clearly enough land to build those 2 single-family homes, and he has actually enough land to build them without any variances. So he would not come to the ZBA. It's that big. It's actually one of the largest lots on the lakefront.
I was going to comment that I asked Mr. Burns.
Yep. And so he would not need any variances. The problem with this lot and the problem with this parcel is that it is an existing platted subdivision. And even more complicated than that, there is a road that runs through it. And it is a paper road. It is not an existing road. It is a platted road that never got built, okay? And if you want to go ahead and pass around the thing again, you can see that the road runs through. Okay? It's not an actual road. It's just a road on paper, okay? Now, that road doesn't exist. In order to pull the building permit and configure the lots the way Mr. Trepanier wanted to configure the lots, that road couldn't be there. So he had to vacate the road. In order to vacate the road requires a legal action in circuit court. In addition to that, we required and asked for that the lot configurations, the 6 lots or 6 existing lots, that the lots or the parcel be reconfigured to 2 parcels, that also be done in circuit court. And these 2 actions that we required of Mr. Trepanier, and I wouldn't say necessarily that we required them, but they were required really under the law, are the actions that he needs in order to move forward eventually with building 2 new homes. In order to do that, you have to submit a lawsuit in circuit court to amend the plat and vacate the road, which is an amendment of the plat, and change the boundaries of the original platted subdivision. And by doing so, you have to notify all of the property owners in Wiedeman's Point that are within a certain feet of this particular area, and all the property owners in Wiedeman's Point, which is this original subdivision. And the reason why you have to do that is because in the original plat, it says that the roads are dedicated to the benefit of the owners in the subdivision. And even though the road was never built, that still requires the notification. In addition, you have to notify and put as a party to the lawsuit the Attorney General. All right? And a number of other folks. The Drain Commission, you can see them on the front of your consent judgment. And so essentially what this consent judgment is the township saying,
We're going to vacate the road, and we're going to reconfigure the plat to allow for these 2 parcels to be created and eventually 2 new single-family homes. I'm going to let Paul go over the details of the consent judgment, and if you have any kind of legal questions or detailed questions, direct them to Paul or direct them to Walter, and have Walter come up in case I've missed anything. My recommendation is to support the signing of the consent judgment, support for Mr. Burns to sign the consent judgment. And I will tell you why that's my recommendation. I will tell you, in full disclosure, there is a neighbor that seems to be somewhat against it. He's not here tonight. He was notified of this meeting. He has retained counsel. But at the end of the day, we are taking 6 lots to 2, obviously 2 larger parcels, where potentially 6 homes could have gone. There are now 2 single-family homes. We're not creating any additional traffic within the internal road of Wiedemann's Point. And the property that he had initially purchased was so big that he could build 2 single-family homes on Whitmore Lake, which is actually quite a feat because pretty much anything that's built on Whitmore Lake needs a variance or 2 for setbacks. But the property that they now own is so large that they can actually build those 2 houses, presumably without any variances. I see no reason in my opinion, I would support and ask the board for their support on this issue. But I do want you to know, under full disclosure, one of the neighbors is against it, or seems to have expressed that to me, although he's not here today to speak officially. With that, I'll entertain any questions. I'll pass it over to Walter if he feels like I've missed anything, and Paul, if you want to kind of address the consent judgment.
Let me go. Yeah, thank you. So what's in front of you is, Howard pretty much covered the big points, but the state law requires that when you amend a plat, that you essentially have to add the governmental entities, and including the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan has a division that reviews these to make sure that they, because a plat is supposed to be permanent, so the state actually has a land surveyor that reviews these prior to approving it, and that's why the Attorney General has to sign off. From our perspective, from the zoning perspective, what we had to work out, which we worked out with Walter, which is we'll have 2 new lots that are created in this plat, but they'll be straddled by a house, an existing house that's going to be knocked down. So by the entry of this judgment, in a way, we make the existing home not comply with the zoning ordinance. Correct. But they've agreed that they will knock that house down. It's in conjunction with the construction of the new houses on or before May 15, 2017, when they anticipate having at least one of the houses down. And as part of this, they're also posting what is now a $15,000 bond to ensure demolition of the house, so we don't have a zoning problem if they don't continue on with the houses. So the process would be for the board to authorize my office to execute the consent judgment. Walter would sign the consent judgment. The judge would enter it as a court order, and it gets recorded on the land records, and it actually changes the lot configuration in the plat to this new drawing. So, but I think we have substantially everything worked out. Walter and I have talked on the phone a number of times, and he can give us an update on the Attorney General where they're at. I think they're pretty close, but we have a court hearing actually Thursday, I think unless you got it adjourned. But so anyway, we're asking that the board authorize my office to sign the consent judgment.
As long as it's materially the same.
As long as it's material, there's going to be some small Scrivener kinds of things, but it will not substantially change. Yes, questions?
Wayne?
Well, I certainly will support this, but my curiosity has got me. There's no road, so I guess the house is there. You must get to off East Shore Drive.
The house that's there is right on East Shore Drive.
Yeah, I mean the driveway comes off East
Comes
because
out
the
to
road's
East Shore
not
Drive.
there.
That's
So.
correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know, but I would be in support.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion to authorize Paul Burns' office to sign the consent judgment regarding case number 15-825-CH.
Support. Oh, sorry.
Ingstrom motion and
I didn't mean to get involved. My thing is-
Chick supported. We'll give it to her. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, that takes us on to number 3, the sewer billing settlement. So let's have a little discussion about that.
So I'll start us off. I'm going to start off by answering some issues that a member of the public brought up. Well, actually, let me take a step back. I'll kind of give a brief overview. This is a particular business in Northfield Township that, and I want to thank Pam, initially was the one who discovered this, and then we sort of, for one reason or another, we kind of dropped the ball on it and kind of rediscovered the fact that this was not being billed and hadn't been billed for 14 years. This is a few months ago that it was initially discovered, and then we sort of rediscovered it. So once we realized, Mr. Dockett and the folks in the audience are correct, once we realized that this had not been billed, and the reason why we realized that it had not been billed is because there was a closing that was scheduled, and one of the parties in the closing called us to make sure that there were no debts associated with the property. And that at that time, our deputy clerk sort of discovered that this was a property that had not been billed. So once we figured that out, we researched the property and found that it was a property that had hooked up to the sewer since 2001, okay? And it had not had a bill since 2001. We calculated the bill without penalties and without interest, in the same way that we had calculated a previous bill that had not been billed since, ironically, 2001, if I'm not mistaken. We calculated the number of REUs under our ordinance in 2001, or the closest ordinance that we had to when the REUs were purchased and the building actually tapped in. To clarify, we had a discussion and a debate as to what that number would be, and Mr. Hardesty made a determination that that number is 2 REUs. So the 2 REU number is correct. It was not 5.4 back in 2001, it was 2. We changed the ordinance about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, Tim, and that's when the change got to 5.4. But originally, for gas stations, we only charged per pump. We changed the ordinance to accommodate mini stations, convenience stores, things of that nature. And Tim made, and I believe it was the right and ethical decision, that under our existing ordinances back in 2001, that it would have been billed at 2 REUs. And so the calculation that you see in front of you, whether or not you disagree with the opinion that Tim has made, is an accurate calculation of the fee that is outstanding. When we realized that we had not billed this property, we immediately sent them a demand letter for the full amount of the REUs that were owed to us, which would have been the 2 REUs from 2001 up until the point at which time we changed the ordinance, and then it became 5.4 REUs, if I'm not mistaken. And in front of you, you have a copy of that demand letter that breaks down those numbers. Okay? Now, once, is there a question? About a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
So the issue was discovered in March or April, so that's 7 months ago?
Yes.
Did they receive a letter from our attorney at all, like the way I do personal property taxes and taxes?
They did not. So we initially.
Did they receive something from our attorney?
No, they did not. So initially Pam had discovered it, and then we sort of lost it. I didn't know about it. It was given to Julie, and then it was passed from Julie to Christina. I was not aware of it. It just got lost again, and it got rediscovered about 2 weeks ago. Okay, there's no. I mean, there is fault there for it being lost, and I will not shy away from that. It wasn't on me, but it was lost again, and we rediscovered it. And when we rediscovered it, we had a conversation with Mr. Burns' office, okay? And we could go two routes. We could immediately sort of start authorizing legal action, and the client, in this case, the person that owed this money, asked us not to go the route of legal action because it would cost him more money. And he said, I am happy to discuss how much I should pay and negotiate. And I called Mr. Burns' office, and Mr. Burns' office was fine with that approach. All right? So I negotiated with the company, and initially I said, here's 100% of the bill. We would like 100% of the bill. The company came back and said, offered 50%. I countered at, I believe, 75%. The company came back and said, 50% is a very fair offer, and that is what I'm sticking to. Now, so now we ask the question, what should we do? And I am recommending that you approve the 50%. And here's the reason why. One, we have a precedent that we have already set for these particular issues. And two, I'm not sure that we are on the firmest of legal ground to go and say that we should settle for 100% of the cost. There has to be an argument of statute of limitations. And even more so, I think that there's some liability if we go and hold up a closing for something that we ultimately may not be on completely solid ground for. I think it's the right decision to settle. That is ultimately your call, and it's in your hands.
Wayne?
I don't think we set a precedent at all. We negotiated one time. I think we are about to set a precedent, though, if we go again here. Can I just read a little bit of what I found out? If it's all right with everybody. The township board did not know anything about this until the packet came out on October 22nd, which was Thursday. As far as I know, I didn't know anything about it. Mr. Berger is the owner of the property, is the brother-in-law of Mr. Nowinski. So, the reason he come up with the 50% is because he's Nowinski's brother-in-law, in my opinion.
You may be right.
Huh?
You may very well be right.
What?
But I'm not sure how it's not relevant.
Okay, well, I'm just, okay. But I heard that the Shell station, along with two other stations that are close to the Michigan line. So there's three Shell stations, or three of the stations involved here that are gonna close the end of this month. So, I think that if this is true, which I'm pretty sure it is.
It is.
That this guy is gonna wanna close, and he's not gonna screw around for $4,000 when he's selling 3 gas stations for hundreds of thousands. And I don't think he's been very nice to us by not paying us for the last 15 years, so I just don't think we should be in a hurry to make our decision here. I would just like to hold off on this for a couple of weeks, and I think the closing will happen, and I think we'll get a check for the full amount. That's just my opinion, but I don't think we should accept 50%. If we do, we'll be accepted, and we don't know how many more is out there. And I'd like to figure out how we can find out. You know, this has happened before, so. But anyway, but I did ask Howard to send them a bill, because when I seen what's in our packet here, and it says that this 453.60 was involved in this, I said, no, that is current. Take that out of there and just send them the bill for that. Why are we gonna have that in there? They owe a current bill for sure. So
We
anyway,
did.
there's where I'm at. I think we can get it all, folks.
Well, I think my opinion, and I go with Mr. Dockett, you're asking a 50% of a current bill, which I don't think that should even be part of it.
No, it's not. It's not 50% of the
Yeah,
current bill. It's
but-
100% of the current bill.
No, I know. What I said was, this shouldn't be in with this 50% bill, because they owe that. Just send them a bill for this month's, or, you know, for this time's.
I think the problem that I have is that, number one, we did an audit. Didn't we do an audit this year and identified those that have not been billed, and this did not filter up? Yes. It did? Okay. So the problem being is, you know, number one, shame on us for us not doing anything on it, but the person still knew that he owed money.
Don't disagree. But at the end of the day, the question is liability. And
I don't think the
What kind of
statute,
liability
number
we
one, I
got?
don't think there's a statute of limitations.
We don't have any
And I don't
liability.
think that we're upholding a closing.
Paul, would you like to step in on your,
And I don't like the first words on this thing. It says, as a result of our audit, our deputy clerk discovered another business.
I
No,
was mistaken
that's
when I
not
wrote
what
that.
happened at all.
I was
Yeah.
mistaken when I wrote that. That's
Excuse me?
I was mistaken when I wrote that. That was my understanding of how it happened. But then after I wrote the memo, our deputy clerk came to me and said, no, it was actually Pam who originally discovered it.
Okay, well,
And then there was a series of things that were dropped. It was
I
not
would-
on, I can tell you that it was not on me. It was on a series of situations that happened in the
I'm
office.
just saying what it says here, Howard. I'm
And I was
not
mistaken
accusing you of
when-
anything.
Yeah, no, I was mistaken when I wrote that.
I don't see the big hurry. We just don't make the decision for a couple of weeks, and I think we'll get it all. That's my opinion. Thank you.
So Howard, it looks to me like you've added the full amount for November to the current balance,
Correct.
getting the total, and then you've divided by 2.
Exactly.
So you are dividing, you're including the 453. I'm trying to do the math, I don't have a calculator.
So the first amount, the balance, the 78,1860,
So it comes
which
out to
is the
like
past due, that's
39,0930.
divided by 2,
39,030.
And then you
Okay.
add in the full 453.60, and that comes to the 43.62. So the current amount is not split in half.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, is there a statute of limitations like there is for personal property taxes? I mean, is it 5 years the same way?
I'm reluctant to give legal advice in open session if this ends up in litigation, to be honest with you.
Well,
But-
either it is or it isn't. I
Well,
mean,
there
we
is,
can't
there
talk
is
in closed
generally,
session, we
generally
can't
there,
talk up here.
generally
when can
there
we
is a
talk?
6-year statute of limitations.
And why isn't the penalty or interest added? In the portion, if he does pay 50%, why isn't it 50% including interest?
We never sent them a bill.
Is ignorance of the
You
bill
know,
an
they-
excuse then
So that means
for
that.
not paying? And then my next question is, this is not a precedent, are we establishing a policy here? Is this gonna be a board policy from now on, that whenever we make a mistake, we're only gonna go after 50% without interest?
I think we should think about it.
I just want, it's okay if that's what the board wants to do, but that's basically what we're doing. This is becoming a policy, not just a precedent.
Bottom line, the guy owes.
I mean, I don't know that there's any better alternative.
I mean, if we did property tax this way,
I can't.
I know you can't.
I can't
I know
even
you
do it.
can't,
That's why
number
I'm-
one.
that's why I'm so,
But if we
you know,
did
being real
property
adamant
tax this
about
way, voters would be up in arms with us.
Right, and I've been pretty, like, determined to go after people for
the statutory amount that I can, including interest.
It's okay.
And
Disagreement's good.
And so from my point of view, it's not my statutory duty to collect this money, nor is it the clerk's office. It's not our statutory duty. So I'm not putting blame anywhere or saying, you know, people don't make mistakes, people do.
Guys,
So did we implement at this point any system, implement and maintain a system of internal control to prevent this? There's something almost funny about this too, that these two properties are so close to each other and neither one was built for all these years, and
And it
they
got
also
lost
happen
twice.
to be, yes, I'm not,
There is
again,
a
we
series-
can't go back and throw blame around, it doesn't really matter, but there's something happened, either, you know, maybe it was, you know, what have we done to make sure?
We did an audit.
Who's we did an audit, what does that mean?
Tim Hardesty
Tim,
and the
remember
sewer
they sent out the whole
department did an
report?
audit.
You didn't catch it, you didn't
But
catch it in audit.
didn't work.
It was caught.
We
it fell
did
through the
catch it,
cracks.
Mr. Tim, do you want to speak to
Well,
it?
you caught it, but the follow-up didn't really work. So, so
Exactly.
that's, I guess, my question then. If we do an audit, what internal controls have we implemented to make sure that it doesn't fall through the cracks again?
Tim, you want to speak to it?
Well, I think we do the billing from our office. I talked to you about this morning.
We don't
So-
do the billing. One thing that we have changed from our aspect is when we turn in a place that has been connected, say this, we used to just turn in one form to one person. Now we are turning it in to the deputy clerk, to the assessor, and to the building department so that they all have a form that a new business has been connected, so that they all can work together. Communication will be better.
The answer to your
And that
question in
sounds-
general is that there have been internal controls initiated, forms created from myself to make sure that that happens, internal controls, and an education of everybody in the office to understand what an REU is and how it's calculated and when it changes.
Well, this
So-
doesn't have anything to do with REU, so this is just the connection. One address gets
does.
one bill, no matter how many, whether they're being billed for $1 million or $1, it's one address, one sewer bill. I understand, and that's great, and I think moving forward, it's great that we've implemented those internal controls. But what about the existing mistakes? This is not a new tap. This is like Tim looking at the number of addresses he has according to what he believes where each tap is, and us looking at the number of sewer bills we send out each month.
It doesn't work that way. There is no list of address that exists at the sewer departments. There is
There
no
isn't.
number
That was my
of
question.
address
That's what
and
I thought
taps
about.
that exist at the
So
sewer
you don't
department.
really have a list of all the taps.
We do not.
It doesn't work that way. And the error of the audit was at the sewer plant. The error was in the sewer department of seeing the audit, knowing that that happened, and it did initially get to the clerk's office, and then it wasn't followed up on in the clerk's office because of the switch, and then there was a sort of secondary error of a sort of follow-up at the sewer department. But I'm not here, this isn't about trying to create blame as to why this particular issue is in front of us. We can talk about that from a personnel perspective if you want to do that at a later date. The issue is...
No, I'm not trying.
The issue
I don't
is-
think it's blame when we talk about how we find additional errors. There's absolutely no blame anywhere. It's,
Well, and I agree.
don't spin it into a blame thing. I'm not trying to do that. It's,
There are internal controls that have been instituted, and hopefully this kind of stuff won't continue to happen.
I wish you'd talk into the mic, Howard. I can't hear a thing you're saying.
What's in front of us today is the issue of what to do about this particular case and how to resolve this particular case. Now, I want you to all know, I will not be upset if you decide differently than what I've recommended. I do recommend that we settle this case at 50%, and there are reasons why I have that recommendation, and they are, in my opinion, valid. But I'm not going to be upset if the board decides that they want to, go against that.
We don't have to do it this minute, do we?
Well,
My concern honestly here is the reason for the delay. So we put it off. It sounds to me as if we're saying we're going to put this off because, well, they have a closing coming up and then they're not going to have any choice but to pay it. And that doesn't seem very ethical to me. that we
I don't think
hijack
we should
someone's
put it off at all,
closing.
Right.
Well, with that being said, and I feel the same way, I don't believe this should be put
But
off.
I think
know-
we're beyond ethics at this point.
I just wanted
When
to
somebody
make it
hasn't
something.
paid something for
This
14
bill is made
years.
out to an address, Howard. You said that you don't make them out the address. That's what this bill is. There's no name on here.
We made that bill. We made that bill. We went on to Word and we typed up that bill because we have to have something that explains to the owner of this property what the breakdown is. That doesn't come out of BS&A.
Well, that's what you sent them, isn't it?
Yes, Mr.
Well, you
Dockett.
sent it to an address, so I mean, you just.
Go ahead, Janet.
You just said that you send them by name. So
Beyond the fact that this is a fair bill.
that's why you get
The
screwed up.
$8,270.20 is a fair bill. That's what he used, that's what he owes. What bothers me is he's asking, no, he's actually demanding, it sounds like this, that we accept 50% of the liability for him not paying his bill. Why would we do that?
That's right.
Why would we do that? Yeah, if we did make an error, but 50% of the liability is ours, he could take it to court, maybe he'd win. I just don't think.
Can we table this?
How about I throw out a motion and just see where it goes, and then it's over with, okay?
well, I'd
I'm going to
rather-
make a
I'd rather
motion
have
to
it
approve the
tabled.
settlement for the sewer.
I tried to make a motion that we tabled it, and then you jump in when I said
Right.
that.
Well, I've been waiting for all of you to talk. It is my turn now. And my turn is I'm going to make a motion. If no one wants to second it or vote for it, it's then done. Okay?
It's what?
It's over. If it does not pass, it's over and taken care of. I'm going to make a motion to approve the settlement for the sewer bill for the property located at 60 East North Territorial, which would be for 50% of the delinquent sewer bills, and then 100% of the most current bill. Is there a second? All right. Those in favor? Aye?
Oh, no, roll call.
Roll call vote.
Roll call? Janet?
No.
Kathy? No. Wayne?
No.
Yes? Yes.
No.
Well, that's that done.
So, motion does not pass.
Huh?
Motion does not pass.
Very good. So now what happens?
All right.
I guess we'll think about it.
What next?
Yeah, we're not, just can't leave this hanging.
Put it off just to discuss it more, just a little bit more. So I'm sorry we voted on it, but that's how I feel right at this moment. So.
It can be brought back again. So, does anyone have any ideas that you can share with Howard? So maybe he could work on this so we can possibly come to an agreement for the individual and the township?
I would demand 75%.
I'm sorry. Well, I just assume wait a week. I think we get it all. We're gonna close. So that's where I'm at.
Any other comments from anyone else over here to my left?
We already
Guys,
went.
I'm not going to, at this moment, I'm not sure what the direction from the board is. I hear a demand 75% and I hear a demand 100%. I do need some direction.
Well, because I think that the vote didn't
You
pass.
tried 85.
Well,
So,
this
well,
gentleman.
I'm just going to say, because I think that the vote didn't pass, you have to go at 100%.
Okay. I agree. I agree.
Unless someone would like to make a motion.
Unless there's another motion.
Very good. That suits me.
Anyone else? All right, on to our discussion items, the DDA letters of interest. So I'm sure you've all read Howard's memo. We do have 3 openings and 5 letters of interest. So I just wanted all of you guys to see who's interested before we make appointments to that. I would recommend anyone contact.
How many openings were there?
3.
3, okay.
2 reappointments and just one vacancy.
What, do you intend to re-sign the ones that are already, or don't you know?
No,
yet?
I don't know. I wanted everyone to see who's interested and maybe, then make some phone calls yourself if you want to talk to any of these individuals or anything like that, and we can bring this back on the next,
Meeting.
at the next meeting?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I mean, I'll ask everybody that submitted a letter to be in the audience. So, and then you guys all can decide, or, well, Marilyn, you can decide how you want to handle that process.
Yeah, I'll throw out the name and we'll get the motion,
Right.
if it passes. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I've lost my agenda.
All right, so the last item on the agenda is sewer capacity. And at my last manager's report, and in my memo here to you today, I indicated that we do have issues related to sewer capacity that we do need to discuss, and we do need to debate, and we do need some direction from the board. And so, I'm glad that the agenda was light today. It's one of the reasons why we didn't call a second closed session meeting as well, so that we could have time to discuss this. I've asked Brian Rubel to be here. I have some maps that I can pass out to everyone, some large master plan maps. But there are really kind of three items that I think are sort of relevant. One is, we probably won't talk about too much, is obviously the equalization basin, and that certainly relates a significant deal to capacity issues. The second really is the most important, and that is, that's the policy of capacity allocation that we do have to address. And the way I put it is allocation of capacity if development is proposed outside of the North Territorial or Green Oak allocations. And then three is, what are the costs associated with a REU? And what are the costs associated? I mean, we call it, we sort of use these terms interchangeably, and we really need to make sure that we understand these terms, because we say a tap-in and then we use the word REU. REU stands for residential equivalent unit. That doesn't mean that, if, let's say, a building comes in and they have 10 REUs, doesn't mean they have 10 taps. They just have one connection to the sewer. But basically what we're saying is that that building is using the rough equivalent of 10 residential equivalent units. And the residential equivalent unit is based on a number of 260 gallons per day. And so we have used the word tap fee at times. It's really not a tap fee, and we should probably get away from using that terminology because it really does confuse. It's really more of a sort of capacity connection charge. But what we say is that one home would have to pay a sort of tap fee, and if we get away from the terminology of tap fee, a capacity connection charge, I think that's kind of the terminology we were using, they'd have to pay a fee of $35.50 in order to build that home. And that $35.50 would come back to the township. And one of the things we really need to discuss is if that $35.50 is enough, and if it's appropriate, and if it is actually a number that is getting us to the point where when we do have infrastructure issues in the future, we have enough money to deal with that. So I've asked Brian to be here today. I really do think that this is a long, sort of detailed conversation. It's not going to all happen tonight, but maybe we can get the conversation rolling tonight and have some discussion and kind of continue over the next so many meetings to do that. So I'll ask Brian to come on up. I'm going to pass out some maps as well, and at various points, you might hear from myself, from Tim, from Brian, throughout this conversation.
Do you want me to start, Howard?
Yeah, please, Brian.
So Howard outlined, I guess, three subjects: policy, the EQ tank and connection fees. Well, actually, we call that system development charge. That's the fancy word that.
I was trying to think.
Yep, that's it. I jotted down, I'll go in that order, I guess. I jotted down some thoughts on policy. I guess I'd like to preface my statement by saying that, we're consulting engineers. We design things. We help you evaluate the technical merits of projects. So I'm very reluctant to expound policy recommendations.
I wanted to wait till you said that you're reluctant to do that. But can you just hold for 1 second
Yep.
and pass out these maps
Yep.
so that everybody hears
Yep.
your thoughts? Thanks, Brian. We don't want anybody to miss the.
No, I can see it.
Pass one down to Trace. I'll share with Trace.
But what I am comfortable doing is I did jot down some thoughts on policies that other communities that I work with use to make sewer decisions. So that's what I did. And I'd be more than happy to go through that, and Howard has a little handout. So just to give you just 2-3 sentences of background, back in 2005 timeframe, a lot happened with the sewer system. The economy was very strong, things were booming, and the two particular things that occurred were the township entered into an agreement with Green Oak Township to increase sewer service within the township. That was hundreds of REUs. I do have that tabulated. We can look at that if need be. And then the North Territorial District was established at about the same time. Interestingly enough, also that occurred at that time was an expansion of the treatment plant was evaluated. The same month all this occurred. Land was purchased next to the plant to expand the plant. There was planning that went into an expansion, the cost opinions that were prepared. So clearly at one time the township was on track to expand that plant. So I think that's just a little bit of a background. That planning did not.
What year was that?
2005. That didn't go any further. I suspect the economy had quite a bit to do with it at that time, and it's probably a good thing that we didn't have a plant sitting there rusting away with no customers. So that was a good thing. As far as policies go, I just jotted down some policies that other communities I work in use. Many of them are cities, so there's a very defined area. You being a township, much larger land area, less defined. I tried my best to focus my thoughts towards a township and not a city because I think things are quite a bit easier when you have a city limits. So your current policy, if you were to have one, if I were to summarize it, was you do not have a service area defined on a map where you have a line, and if you're developing a parcel within a polygon, you get sewer service. The practice, maybe that's a better word, the practice has been if you are developing land and you front the cost of connecting to the existing sewer system and there's capacity there, then generally you've been allowed to connect.
And if you're adjacent to it.
Yeah.
If you're
fairly close by.
Right, fairly close
Yeah.
by.
Many developments throughout the township have occurred that way. That's essentially the 1A, what I put down here. Expand wastewater treatment. Well, you would allow development to occur and just expand as you go. And that's a very common practice. Most treatment plants are not built on day one to serve the ultimate population. They're built for a modest amount, and then they're expanded over time as development occurs. I don't know any treatment plant. Well, there's probably a few small subdivisions that went in full capacity day one, but municipal or community-based projects generally go in phases. And I work with other communities that don't have a defined boundary as well. I work with a community near Adrian, a township that has a sewer system, 2 of them actually, 2 townships. And again, they have the same practice. If you're next to a sewer, you pay the cost to connect. Generally, you're allowed to connect. So you're not uncommon with others. 1B would be similar. Again, the thought is that you can continue to add parcels and you would continue to expand the plan as you went. The only difference I would say with 1B is some communities do draw a boundary and say this is the ultimate service area for sewers. And they match that boundary with zoning and land use plans. The more dense land uses is where they would plan for the sewer. And so it's very clear up front where that sewer is going to be in 10 or 20 years. Communities that I know do that are Genoa Township in Livingston County. I believe Canton Township in Wayne County does the same. I'm certain there are more, but those are just two examples. So that creates a very defined area, and it makes, it's very clear to the consulting engineer when those calls come in. Oh, you're in the Seward area? Absolutely. You probably have a master plan prepared where you know all the trunk sizes that will be built there as they come in. So it's very defined. It's matched with the land uses. I am aware that those are sometimes challenged by property owners. The one community that I did talk to indicated that they had been successful in defending their boundary. So that's, that's why I called it 1A and 1B. They're very similar. You expand the plan as need develops. The only difference would be you have a boundary in B and you do not have a boundary in A. You just kind of let the market conditions.
And the one thing I want the board to understand and be clear on is we do not have a defined sewer service boundary, okay? So the only, actually, we do have two, theoretically. One defined sewer service boundary would be the capacity that we have for Green Oak, okay? And the second sewer service boundary would be the capacity that we've allocated for North Territorial, okay? So those would be two clear sewer service boundaries. But for the rest of the township, the policy has always been, you do see, and I think Kathy and Janet are kind of talking about it, you do see an outline of a sewer boundary. But really all that indicates is that's where the sewer is. It is not a defined sewer service district that only in those areas can you have sewer. The policy of the township, just to reiterate, because I just want to make sure everybody's really truly understanding after tonight as to how this all works. The policy of the township has always been that if you're next to the sewer, and if you pay the cost of, what was the fancy terminology we came up with?
System development charge.
If we pay the cost of the system development charge, and you pay for the infrastructure to be on your land, then you get the sewer. The township lets you hook in, okay? Now, it has to be next to your property, obviously.
Within 200 foot.
Huh?
Within 200 feet.
Yeah, and the Planning Commission has passed an ordinance that says you can't leapfrog, so you can't leapfrog properties. It's never truly been defined what that means, what leapfrogging means. Does leapfrogging mean 5 parcels, or does leapfrogging mean 1 parcel? Historically, the policy has been if the sewer is near. So this is the way that Eagle Gardens got built. This is the way that Adler subdivision got built. This is the way that most of the subdivisions got built, is that the sewer was close or adjacent. They paid the fee. They tapped in. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, what happened on most of them is they put in their own sewers and dedicated them to the Northfield Township. That's what they did with where you live.
And that'll always be the case.
The builder did the infrastructure.
Right. We're never building sewer infrastructure for a developer. That's always going to be the case. I can't foresee an issue with that for an area where that would not be the case. Go ahead.
Item 2 would be a more radical step. The capacity inventory did look at the demands for your commitments in North Territorial and Green Oak Township. If you did the math, you're extremely close to the capacity at that plant. You probably could, with some negotiation with the DEQ and building an EQ tank, just get those existing commitments treated with your current plant. So you could have a policy, I suppose, that we need that plant to meet our existing commitments, and we shouldn't be thinking about any other connections to be made. I'm not advocating that. That's just one of the potential stances you may choose to take.
What would the negatives, okay, so,
Yeah.
so essentially that policy is a policy of moratorium. It's a moratorium on development. It's just, let's just speak plainly as to what that policy is. So, you know, there's pros and cons to everything, obviously. So what would the, what would the negative, I mean, the pros would be you'll never have to deal with this issue. You know, you always know that you'll have capacity until it builds, and you'll never be dealing with the issue of having to expand the plant until all of North Territorial or all of Green Oak Township build out. So that's a potential positive. But so what are the negative issues related to that policy?
Yeah, I'm not sure they're engineered, well, cost-wise, it's always cheaper to run the plant with more flow. You can spread out fixed cost over more customers. So it gets cheaper to add per customer to add more flow. And then there's clearly, I'm an engineer, there's clearly economic development detriment by not allowing new sewer
Right,
connections.
we won't ask you to go there,
Very
because
good.
some people would make a counter argument,
Yeah.
depending on.
Yeah, engineering-wise, there is cost efficiency with more customers to that plant. If you add 50% more customers, you don't add 50% more cost. I think the sewer bills theoretically should go down.
So, can I ask a question? Okay. All right, I'm looking for, we don't know, we know we have obligations to the North Territorial District and to the Green Oak Township. They may never use what they're,
Right.
what we're obligated to, they were obligated to give them. You said in previous conversations that in other communities you worked with, that they've been in the same situation and that they have actually, I don't know if you call it borrowed from that, those obligations. So if we wanted to do that, supposing we wanted to do that, so that we could have more development or growth or do whatever we want so that more people can tap in, how do we keep up with those obligations? I mean, is there a way to keep building the plant over a period of time so that when Green Oak, say, comes to us and says, I need to use this amount of usage, and it's available for them, so we don't find ourselves in some kind of a legal bind? Is that possible? Is that what you've seen done?
Yes, Ms. Chick, that is the most common practice that I see, is as demand builds for new connections, the community expands the plant, and there's land for that. Your permit allows you to add more flow, so you would need to watch the flow, watch the economy, watch the trend of connections, and as you got close to that threshold, you would need to commit to a capital project at the plant to add capacity.
But isn't it common and normal, like when the developer comes in and wants to, borrow the capacity there, that they pay extra fees for that? Like I know in Lyon Township, like each lot that's sold now has a $13,000 assessment on it in each neighborhood, that the builder's absorbing half and the homeowners are absorbing the other half for their maintenance and expansion or sewer development strategies or whatever they call it.
It appears to me that every case is unique. There are developer agreements between the township and developers that specify those types of costs. Some of those costs are in your system development charge. Some may be in a developer agreement.
Right.
So I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Well, yes and no, but, yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
If the problem is, I've talked with Howard about this, the problem is you put in a complex of some kind, then you've got to put in bigger pipe and bigger pumps. That it's just not, you can't put the flow, just because you want a complex doesn't mean you can go into the line that's there. So you have to back it up all the way,
Right.
all the way to the sewer plant.
Right.
With
Yeah,
bigger
what I'm
lines.
trying to get at, is, okay, so let's say, the MDR areas that we do have, if we left it,
Can
like.
I interject for
Yeah,
1
yeah,
second,
go ahead.
please? Hold your thought. I just want to make one point. The master plan in front of you
the MDRs that you have in front of you, the Leland property, only one section of the MDR south of Wildwood Lake, because one section, it's very 100% clear that the property owner does not want to sell and is not interested in development of their property. So the one section of the MDR south of Wildwood Lake, okay, which was Doc Griffith's farm, a Leland farm, the Kelly farm, which is just south of the township, and the small portion of the Donna Lane property, which is a very unlikely piece to develop because it's mostly wet. None of that, I repeat, none of that is included in the capacity that you have allocated. So when we talk about that your existing capacity plus North Territorial plus Green Oak Township gets you theoretically to the plant's capacity with a little bit of flexibility depending on if you build an EQ. None of those properties are included. So if any of those properties want to develop, master planned correctly, and this is not the issue. I mean, this is not a sort of an extension of the debate that's happening at the Planning Commission. This is completely separate from the issue of what the Planning Commission is dealing with. Any of those properties that want to develop that are master planned appropriately, the board would have to have a policy decision on the allocation of capacity. So essentially, that's why this question is in front of you. And I wanted to clarify that because that's going to come up here in a little bit, and I've talked to Brian a little bit about an issue that I want you all to think about. But I wanted to sort of clarify that. So sorry, Marilyn.
You said exactly where I was trying to head. That was my question: is the areas that we do have MDR, could we even put a subdivision in based on our capacity? I mean, if we didn't want to borrow from Territorial, Green Oak, or anything, let's say a subdivision did want to come in on south of Wildwood Lake, what would happen?
You do not have the capacity to serve Green Oak, North Territorial, and other developments regardless of where they are.
If North Territorial builds out to the full extent of the way the district was designed, and Green Oak builds out to the full extent of the way we've allocated that capacity, we don't have the capacity.
Right, so then we don't even have subdivisions in the areas that we've said we'll take a subdivision.
That is why this issue is in front of you, and that is precisely the reason why it has to be addressed.
Another thing I want to have mentioned, because I know people have asked me in regards to because it was just brought up, but I think people don't understand that there is probably and possibly legal ratifications on it, that why don't we take from North Territorial and why don't we take from Green Oak, like pay Peter to pay Paul type thing. And really how I explain it is it's already been allocated. You can't do that.
Well, you can if you can.
I know townships have done it, but is there legal ratifications from taking?
Yes, if you absolutely can do it. There's no legal ramifications of taking the capacity, as long as when somebody in the North Territorial District wants to develop, you have the capacity for them. So as Brian indicated before, Trustee Otto, almost every community does that because there is no community. Go ahead. Why don't you restate your thoughts on that?
I'm in agreement. Exactly what you're saying is, when you build a plant at day one, you don't build it for the entire community. You build it for the current conditions plus some growth, and then as that growth comes, you expand it for the next batch of growth. And yes, Saline is the community that is wrestling with that same question. They have in this case, it's a developer outside the city limits that wishes to come in. That would utilize all of the capacity for the existing city, the empty parcels in the city. So by doing that, they are committing then to expand the plant when the inside the city limit development occurs. They have not taken action on that. All I can tell you is the feedback has been positive to that. So they have not officially acted upon that.
Pretty much like a school district. You build for what you got, and then when more come, you build another school.
Because if we just hold out for North Territorial, I mean, we could never have development.
Exactly.
Right, so I would like to get some kind of policy and plan.
I'm not questioning it. What I'm
Right.
just saying is that this is something that cities have been doing all along.
I believe that's correct.
It isn't that we can't do it. And
Right,
I
but-
just wanted
but-
to clarify that. It's just the township has to determine, or the board has to determine if that's what they want to do.
So I think we came in a circle. We need to establish a sewer expansion policy going forward, and a policy for doing that, borrowing from the obligations that we have. I don't know what you would call it.
I would say I would agree with that. I won't speak for Tim or Brian, but I think that is what needs to happen. There are some other issues that need to be discussed as well. And so sort of kind of Trustee Chick to put that issue, because that's the number one issue as to what that policy is. And we're not going to create that policy tonight, but what we're doing tonight is we're setting the agenda for kind of what follows. And this really is a long conversation. And one of the things that Supervisor Engstrom had suggested, and I 100% agree, is that this really needs to be on the agenda for workshops into the future, just as a standing agenda item, because it's not a simple conversation. It's not a one-day conversation. It's a conversation, complexity over time. But some of the other issues that are in front of us is cost. And so, I will tell you that, there was a phone call with a number of our consultants, and when we talked about the fee of $35.50 as a system development charge, there was sort of almost universal agreement that that was incredibly low. And so the concern, and I think that's what Supervisor Engstrom is getting at, is we have a system development charge of $35.50, and here in Lyon Township they have one of $13,000. And so, and the system development charge needs to be representative of what are the costs of expansion and infrastructure into the future. And, go ahead.
Is that even possible? Let's say, we'll call them the borrowed taps. Let's say by Wildwood Lake, they want to develop. And so we borrow some taps from our allocations and give them to them. Are you going to charge them so much more than the $3,500 that you think you're going to cover a $20 million sewer?
I don't know, but I
mean,
think
is
that that's the
impossible?
analysis.
I mean, do the math.
I think that's
the. Charge them $1 million a tap?
That's the analysis we have to do.
We're trying to
That's
figure
what
out.
we're trying to figure
So
out.
much money, or are you going to wait and let them tap in at a reasonable fee, and then when the people who come along who already had the allocations want to tie in, go, oh geez, there's no more room. We're going to have to really up the costs here. I mean, I don't. And then also you talked about the plant. It's kind of like the diminishing returns. There's like a certain amount you can increase business to the plant without increasing costs. Your overhead goes down. But then at some point, there's like a curve there.
A tipping point.
Yeah, you need to, all of a sudden, we need to add another.
Well, we're
part of
already at the
plan,
tipping
and
point,
so
right?
now it's not.
Or close?
Close.
Yeah. I mean, we're here.
Then all of a sudden, it's not cost efficient because you're spending a couple
I mean,
$1 million.
if what you're saying is the opinion of the board, it's not. I don't think it's the right position to be. But if that becomes, the analysis and the opinion.
What you're saying, what do you mean if that's the opinion of the board?
If we get to the point, for example, where we say it's too expensive to expand the plant and we don't want to put that on the backs of the taxpayers in the future, then we're in a moratorium.
Then we're what?
In a moratorium.
Or we have to pay for it some other way. I'm just saying you can't just charge the people who want to develop these exorbitant amounts, because we talk about ways to bring in development. you know, there's so many ways, Parks and Rec, you know, people want that, other than just downtown development, or also lower taxes encourage people to move into communities when they look around and they see what the taxes are. And probably sewer taps is probably another thing that deters development. You know, if they go too high, people might not want to, so we might have to do it some other way.
That's exactly
I don't
what-
know what way, but.
I'm not saying it because Howard, I have it written down here. I will not support a rise in connection fees to the township development, because we need development more than we need anything, and we're not going to get it. We found out tonight downstairs. Well, was after the meeting. He said that our restaurant would be 15 REUs. That's $52,000 if they want to open a restaurant for the. It's not a 35,000 for a house. Every time one of these gas stations open that needs 6 connection fees, or 8 or 10 or 12, runs into $50,000 pretty fast.
I don't disagree with the logic, Mr. Dockett, but it's just not representative of how development works in
But
Southeast
we'll get
Michigan.
money back on taxes if they.
Mr. Dockett, it's just,
Huh?
you can't, it doesn't work that way. You can't,
Well,
the system
I
has to
would
pay
not
for
support it.
itself.
I won't. Huh?
The system has to pay for itself.
Well,
That's the way.
You're not
that's the
going to
way-
get anybody to move in if they have to pay 50 grand to
Right.
open
So
a restaurant.
but every other-
Just even, you know, we talk about, oh, subdivisions in our already zoned MDR, well, no one will come, because, you know, they can't. They can't right now, unless we come up with a policy. If we say, you know, this much, it will cost you to get here, let them make that decision, or we have to have some kind of number out there,
Well,
someplace.
yeah, who's got those numbers? That's what I'd like to know. What are people willing to pay?
Well,
I
in
mean,
Lyon Township, it's 13
Exactly.
and a lot.
Yeah.
Why would we be any different than what the surrounding communities are charging?
Oh, yours is on the low end. I mean, Hamburg is 15 or 18, something like that.
15 or 18,000?
Yeah, for sewer.
Hamburg is 15 or 18,000?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So you start adding this up,
How
we
much?
could get them equalization based and pretty close.
How much was Hamburg?
15 to 18,000.
15, 5, 10, 15.
Jackie, I'm trying. You know, we are on the low end.
Brian,
Mr. Thompson.
I apologize if you've covered this
That's
at some point in the past
No
or
problem.
today, but we owe Green Oak Township something. We've committed to provide them with something in the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
How much of what we've committed to Green Oak are they currently using on a percentage basis, approximately?
Not much at all. A few percent.
A few, less
Yeah.
than 10?
I think that's correct.
Okay. And we've committed to certain levels in our own North Territorial District. How much of that is being used?
Probably less than 10%. Probably
Okay.
4 or 5.
All right. So we're nowhere near our legally contracted for obligations.
Long way to go.
Okay.
And to put it into perspective of the actual plans, so there's, you know, you can talk about capacity in multiple ways. You can talk about capacity, Tracy, as you just said, in what you're obligated to, or you can talk about capacity of what is existing in the plan. So if you put it in perspective of the plan, your plan is operating at 50% capacity. And so,
So the bottom line overall is that we do not have the capacity to cover our commitments.
If they were all to occur, yeah, well,
If
yeah.
they were all to occur at the same time.
But usually the phasing over time is considered with this decision, usually.
So can you explain how that works? Okay, so the obligations that we have to Green Oak, have they paid us for them? Is this just, how?
No, I believe they pay as they connect.
Okay.
And they pay your system development charge.
we just gave them the capacity. We signed it, and we, as a board, went over that in great detail a number of months ago. But this
Right, can you explain how long ago that was, that it was,
It was about a year, probably.
no, that Green Oak got their
Yeah,
capacity?
when-
Oh,
Two-
when was that?
2005.
20 years.
20 years ago.
So we signed an agreement many years ago of which they've used maybe 5% of.
But there, why did we, there was a
Why'd we
reason we
do that?
signed that agreement. They gave us something in return for that. We used something in Green Oak.
Yeah, was there any decision at that time to grow in that area for development? I mean, on Green Oak's part?
The rationale was, there also is a court order that limits the expansion of the plant in the Livingston Circuit Court, of which Green Oak Township is a party to that litigation. But the rationale was more users, get you more connection fees, get you your ability to, more users is a good thing because you have income coming in which helps you sell bonds to finance the expansion of the plant. So the concept was a regional plant with more users, more money, a better ability to bond rather than build a whole bunch of little plants around the area.
But that vision never fully was implemented. Because a number of the communities that were sort of part of that initially 20 years ago are not part of it anymore, and that they now have their own.
Big part of it was cleaning up the lake. All them houses on the lake were polluting the lake, so that's one of the biggest things that we took on Green Oak. But as far as I remember.
I'm sorry for the ignorant question, but are we under any kind of cost restraint in regards to the, I'm going to call them tap-in fees because I forget the new terminology already. Cost-wise, so we have a set fee right now, and we have so much capacity allocated to Green Oak. Are we able to adjust our fees as we see fit, or are we under some contractual liability to keep those at a specific rate?
Let me address that. There is a Michigan Supreme Court called Bolt versus the City of Lansing. And your connection fee is supposed to be based upon an actuarial or an accounting function where the township evaluates the cost of the plant and the infrastructure and so on and so forth, considers depreciation, and there's actually a study that's supposed to be done every 5 or 10 years. This township's done it maybe 5 years ago. And under that, it's called a Bolt study. And then the Bolt study makes a recommendation as to a range of connection fees that you can charge that are rationally based upon an accounting function. So it's not market value. It's, you know, that Lyon Township's charging $12,000 and Hamburg's charging $18,000, so let's sell them for $2,000. You know, it's actuarially based upon an accounting formula set by the Michigan Supreme Court.
So to address that, so when Kathy asked the question, Trustee Braun asked the question earlier, and they said, or sorry, Treasurer asked the question earlier, asked the question earlier about how do you pay for it, and I said the sewer plant has to pay for itself. And it's both because of Bolt and because the sewer plant is an enterprise district, which means that the revenue associated with the sewer plant has to actually pay for the cost of service of the plant. When we did the study, we didn't actually officially do a Bolt study, but we did do a study most recently that looked at, when we did the study, that looked at the cost of the quarterly fee, and we raised the quarterly fee from like $73 to $84. We also looked at the issue of the connection fee. And what we found is that we could, the plant itself today, and now we have more information.
Yes, we do.
Because when we did that study, we did not do that study when we had the information on the capacity. But when we did that study before we had the information of this capacity issue, we found that we could justifiably argue for a sewer, or for a system development charge of upwards of $7,000 to $8,000. Because of what Mr. Dockett has said, there's always been this policy to try to keep it low. And I think that has been a board policy for many, many years. And I think that perspective really needs to start being rethought, because I don't actually think that sort of artificially keeping that low is in the township's best interest, not for us today, but this is in the township's best interest 20 years from now. This is when none of us are here. And what I truly worry about, and Tim and I kind of both, and the reason why I'm saying to you this really needs to be a conversation, a continual conversation, is because I worry deeply that things that we do today, if we don't think about this long term, that we're going to put the township in a position where it's unsustainable in 20 years. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a position where I've advised or directed in a policy way, not made the decision, but advised, and we get 20 years from now, and we're at capacity, and we don't have the money to expand the funds. And then that's where Treasurer Braun is talking about that.
Are you talking about raising sewer bills or increasing tap fees? Oh, because there's only there aren't, I mean, it just seems more fair to do that than to try to get the few people that live here now to pay so much more
Right,
in their
no.
sewer bills to pay for future development.
Right,
I mean, that seems cruel. Yeah.
The quarterly fee covers the maintenance of the plants. Okay? So you-
We've been talking about tap fees this whole
We've
time,
been
not.
talking about tax,
And wages.
which is part of the maintenance of the plant, Mr.
Wow.
Dockett.
And Brian, would you?
Maintenance is different than wages.
Brian, and just to be clear, so let's use the North Territorial District as a example, that even though the sewer is there, they still have to pay, and I know we're trying to get away from tap fee, they still pay their tap fees, correct?
New development would pay that.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, anything new coming in, even though the sewer is there, they paid the assessment, whatever, they still pay their tap fee.
Whatever it's
Your
gonna be
current,
at that
your
time.
current tap fee at that time.
That's
Yes.
right. That's why you can't buy them ahead of time, because they used to be $200, you know?
So, one of the things we have to talk about is the policy. One of the things that we have to talk about is the fee. And the other thing we have to talk about, which relates to the fee, which is, we can't do this for the entire township, unfortunately. But I think we have somewhat an obligation, and I'd like to hear some debate on this. But in my opinion, we have some obligation to understand what our infrastructure costs are with some of these larger projects. So let's say a developer calls. We have had some calls. I'm not saying we've had people pounding on our doors. There have been some calls on the Leland property. And the question becomes, we'd like to build a number of homes on the Leland property. And we do. And the first answer is, I don't know, because we don't know what the policy is allocating capacity for the Leland property. So that's the first question. And it gets at, which is the policy. The second question is, what's the tap fee? And we're sort of clear at this moment that it's pretty low, and it's probably exorbitantly low, and to a detriment of the township in the future from an infrastructure standpoint. So that needs to be addressed. And the third issue is one of, it's another issue of capacity, but it's a different issue of capacity than the plant capacity. It's an issue of capacity in the conveyance. So it's an issue of capacity in the actual line. So I'll give you an explanation of how the Leland property works. Okay? So just bear with me for a moment. When the North Territorial Sewer District was put in, there was a pump station that we built for that district. And that pump station has, and Brian or Tim can get my terminology better, but it has two possibilities for two lines. It sort of has, it's probably a concrete sort of structure, and in that concrete structure there's two holes in it, right? One of the holes has a line in it, and that line goes from the North Territorial District, and I don't know exactly how it gets to the plant, but it sort of meanders up north and gets to the plant. And that line was put in for North Territorial, okay? And all of the REUs, if the North Territorial built out, it would be both of the lines, right? It would be both lines. If somebody came in and built on the Leland property, they would be taking up a significant amount of the capacity of the current line that's there, right? So in order for somebody to build on the Leland property, we would have to have a dollar amount. I don't know what that dollar amount would be, but it would be a big dollar amount. It would be millions. Then we would have to be guaranteed. We wouldn't necessarily need to put the line in right, the second line in right away, but we'd have to put a bunch of money in the bank so that when and if the North Territorial District did start building out, that we had not capacity in the plants, but capacity itself, okay, so that we would have the amount appropriate to build that second level. That's not only the issue of the Leland property, we know that because of all the research that went into the issue of the Leland property, okay? So we have a lot of knowledge on the Leland property that we don't have with other properties. We don't know what that looks like on the Kelly farm.
Is there a sewer line there?
There is a sewer line there. We don't know what the I don't know how big that line is.
I'm talking about Leland's property.
Huh?
I'm talking about Leland's property.
There's a sewer line next to Leland's property. It's really darn close.
It's really what?
It's really close. It's at the corner.
Yeah, it doesn't go there. I mean,
It's at the
the
corner.
school put it in, the school put it on their property as far south, far north as they could, because they didn't want to hook them in. They have to be within 200 feet of it. So.
If you look at Mr. Dockett, I don't want to kind of debate this.
Well, I
because it's
don't
not
want to
relevant
argue
to
about it, but
debate
I
the
don't think,
details,
I don't think
but
they
I
have
can tell
sewer.
you, there is a gravity line right there, the Leland property's right there.
Yeah, well, it doesn't.
Okay,
it
so
doesn't go- it
it's
doesn't go
about as
right.
close as you can get. It would frankly meet the
It's not
intent
200,
of the
it's more than
ordinance.
200 feet, Howard.
But why do we have something that has to be within 200 feet?
That's what our law says. If you're within 200 foot, we have to let you hook up.
For all intents and purposes, the Leland property is pretty darn close to sewer.
It's pretty close, but it isn't on the line. They did it.
Right, but then if we say that, then none of our MDR is ever
is that a
gonna
forced
develop.
Is that a force main or is it from the school? From the school? Huh?
Are you talking the new high school?
Yeah,
They have their own pump station that they pump into our gravity line.
yeah, okay.
But we're not talking about that line. We're talking about the gravity line right there. The Leland property is right there. Okay?
I'm not running on sewers. I don't know why you're talking about them. I don't know why you bring them into the conversation. They're not on sewers. Leland property.
Right, but we're trying to see, like, MDR, half of Leland is MDR, right?
All of Leland is empty.
Oh, all of it?
Pretty much all. Then if that's the case, then we gotta go back to the planning commission and discuss the policy of where you want development. So if Mr. Dockett is gonna argue that point, then the question is the Leland property, is the master planning of the Leland property approved?
Well, I don't have to argue the point. Either it is or it isn't. I don't know.
So we have this issue of cost of conveyance. We have the issue of policy, we have the issue of cost of tap fee, we have the issue of cost of conveyance. And I think all three of those things really need to be addressed. Well, the third issue, which is cost of conveyance, we would have to pay Tetra Tech to research that. Now, we would not be researching it if we were to do that. I'm not saying we should, okay, because there could be very legitimate debate as to why we shouldn't do it, right? But if we were to do it, we would not do it at a precise dollar. It would be a very significant range. Now, the flip side of that, I just want to be very clear, that the argument against doing that is, why are we doing an analysis that a developer would do ultimately after they came to the township and said they wanted this? And my answer to that is, we would not be doing the analysis of the developer at that level. We would not be precise cost, precise engineering. We're just getting a general number so that when somebody calls and asks on the Leland property, we have a sense at that moment of what that cost is going to be within a very large range that we could give them. And that would also be the case of potentially other large properties. We don't have to do that. The two most important things, obviously, are cost of connections and policy. The one thing that gets into the cost of the connection is potentially what some of those costs are of infrastructure that has to support each of these various larger properties, and how that potential cost is built into the sewer connection. So, I mean, it really does all sort of wrap into each other. There are some rooms.
So what would the next steps be for assessing the amount of that fee going forward? So if our first step is look at that fee, determine what it should actually be, what are the next steps for that? To end up with a
Yeah.
definitive amount and not a, well, Lyon Township pays that and Hamburg
Right.
pays that, like,
A good chunk of that work was done 2 years ago, so we have that to build from. It's not like we have to start from scratch, but I think Howard is correct. It's how much of the future projects, we have to assign a cost to the future projects, in particular perhaps the plant and any of these conveyance projects that you wish to consider. We have to put a cost on those, and then we can, this is all done in a spreadsheet, so we can look at permutations pretty quickly at that point, and we can decide. So it would not be wouldn't be a very extremely costly thing to do.
So this is going to be a lot of future discussions. Can we have some kind of an outline, a step-by-step plan to get us through this discussion so that we're not going off in different directions at different meetings and we're following something to get to an end point?
well, I think that's important too, because I feel like we've started this conversation so many times and then it just kind of drops. We don't ever take any next steps. So I think an outline would be great.
I think that that's actually really appropriate. And if you all are in agreement of having this as an agenda item on the workshops, there will be an outline for the next workshop. And the first thing on the outline will be discussion of the policy. That's the very first question, is discussion of the policy. Because obviously if the policy is a moratorium, then there is no question. I mean, the rest of those questions sort of become less relevant.
Well, and then, yeah, and if it's going to be a moratorium, because it's coming up on time to do the master plan review anyways, isn't it? Like next year or something, is it? Yeah, when you guys start working on it for the future, yeah. Because if
starting
we
the
are going to do a
process.
moratorium, then we got to change all, nothing matches your sewer, So, yeah, I would love to have this keep going, a conversation forever, because, yeah, as we said, we've talked about it lots of times, but
So
never.
we'll be seeing you at a lot of meetings, Brian. Right?
Yeah.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Part of that outline too, because I know it wasn't discussed in detail as the other things, but the equalization basin. So that's more of an infrastructure.
Yeah, and I don't know, Brian, are you prepared to?
I'm sorry, the equalization basin? You were kind enough to authorize me to get started on that, must have been September, late, probably your second meeting in September. We have kicked that off. Mr. Hardesty and I and staff on each side have kicked that off. We've walked the site. We've talked about potential locations at the wastewater site that such a storage tank may be located. We've talked about features of the tank that the township staff may wish to incorporate. We have scheduled a meeting, a site visit to a very similar facility in Macomb County in November. We're going to go look at. I think it's important that the staff see another facility firsthand and ask those operators key questions about how it functions and how they like it and what they like and don't like, so that we can get a good concept together. So I think that'll go on. I think we'll probably have most of it wrapped up end of this calendar year. So, again, that's just the planning part, but we'll have a good cost opinion. We'll know, we'll have a good roadmap for where it might go.
And where is that in Macomb?
Richmond.
In Richmond?
Richmond, Michigan, yes.
All right, well, I think that was a lot tonight. Does anyone want to keep talking about this, or time to digest and?
Howard talked for an hour without the mic. I couldn't hear anything he said. Stood up there and talked.
Everyone good with that? And we'll just keep revisiting this until we get fully educated on it? Thank you, Brian, for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Hold on, I've lost. All right, well, that takes care of our discussion items. That takes us on to the second call to the public. Is there anyone that would like to speak this evening? Come on up. Once again, we limit it to 3 minutes and not a question and answer session. Thanks.
I'm just going to, you all know who I am, I was here previously, so. I think you're onto the right direction regarding the sewer studies. Speaking from an experience point of view, one of the things, or a couple of the things you do have is, I believe you already now have a as-built, which shows where your lines are, where your pump stations are, where your connections are, and hopefully the size of each of those lines, which is one of the most instrumental things. Howard has discussed again, and you have a capacity within the plant based upon your REUs. You need to know what the capacity of these lines are so you know what needs to be done to expand them. And you really can't even get into policy until you have some idea of what those are and where they are with what you want to do. Because if you expand them outside of the existing areas where you have it, you will be putting yourself into a jeopardy situation, or the potential of one. And again, just to another point, you probably have, and I haven't looked at your budget, but for the sewer plant, but you've got an O&M budget, which is your operation and maintenance. You probably have a capital improvement budget, which is to do the essential maintenance long-term wise for a 20-year plan for the necessary improvements. And then you also probably have this system development or your expansion plan, a fund that would be going to that, which would then determine. These are the types of costs and things that you're going to need to deal with this to go forward. Whether you take them from existing areas or you take and say, if you know how you want to do it, but you have to have a cost that's going to be borne by the developer or the development of properties, not the existing users. The existing users have the essential costs for operation and maintenance and capital improvement, but they don't have the costs that are being borne for improvement at the sites. So you have to look at that and figure out how that's going to incorporate in. So I think you're on the right track, and encourage you to move forward with what you're trying to do.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to speak tonight? All right. Thank you. That moves us on to board member comments. Wayne?
Buy and use local businesses and services. I got to read a little note here from October 13th. The Township Board held an executive session to consider the purchase of real property for the residents of Northfield Township. The minutes indicate that Dockett was in the building but refused to come to the meeting room to provide a fifth vote needed to go into closed session. This is true. Dockett thinks if the township is going to spend big dollars, it should be done with a vote of the people, not in the boardroom with 5 board members. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Thank you.